Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the newest patch notes for Rivals of Aether 2, and this is going to be the first patch the game has ever received since its release, and there is a ton of just quality of life changes, as well as some changes to the shield, which is pretty important. Now, in today's video, we are only going to be talking about the changes that were made to the characters, so a link will be down below if you are curious and want to read about any of this stuff, but let's get right into these changes. Also, really quick, at the end of this video, I'm going to be making a tier list, not for the current state of the game, but just based off which characters got changed the best and which characters got changed the worst. Just thought I should throw that in there. Starting off with Zetterburn, and their main goal when fixing Zetterburn was just making it so down special is a little bit toned down, and it isn't as easy to confirm into up strong. And I think they did a really good job at that. For up special, they're going to make it so there is less hit stun afterwards, so that it just doesn't combo into up strong, because up special should never be comboing into anything. So I think this is a great change. For down special, there is going to be this option, which doesn't really matter. I feel like this was something that didn't happen a ton, but now it's just not going to happen at all. But makes it so it is a weaker spike off stage. So this isn't something that you really saw happening a ton. I feel like Zetterburn players weren't often going off stage with down being spiking people, but if they were, it was killing you extremely early. That's not going to be the case now. Well, it is still going to steal that stock, just not as early. And then finally, well, they changed the damage of jab, but they did that for like every jab 1-2 in the game, made it from 4 to 3, so that doesn't really matter. But the big change is going to be this change to back air, just making it send a little bit further at higher percents, making it harder to confirm into. And I think this is a great change just because back air is such a free confirm into up strong, even forward strong at certain percent. So now it's just going to be a lot harder to actually get a super easy confirm into this, and you still definitely are going to be able to confirm into this. They didn't really take away from any of Zetterburn's kill confirms, I guess, aside from this up special one. They're just making the windows on them smaller, which I think is a good change. Next up is going to be Ranno, and he received more than just a little change, and rightfully so, because this character was definitely very overtuned, and their main goals when nerfing him were to make his kill power weaker and also to make his recovery weaker, specifically with the tongue sling on the bubble, and they did that here with the first change. They make the special recovery 10 frames to 8 frames, and you're no longer able to jump attack cancel when slinging to your bubble, and I think this is a really good change because side B on the stage as a neutral tool is still really strong, still to the wall really strong, but just when you are off stage and using the bubble to give yourself a ton of extra momentum, it's not going to be as good of a tool there. And I agree, because that was just an amazing tool for Ranno. That cool gimmick of this character is that he's really fast on the ground but really slow in the air, and then you just have this race car move in the air that instantly gets you back to the wall. It just doesn't make a ton of sense, and you still can do that. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult, or just not as good. Now, they also made some changes to his up B. They made the hitbox on it smaller, at least I think this is what that means. Yeah, it does. And they also made it so it is harder to ledge cancel this move, which is another just really good quality of life change. Whenever Ranno is committing to that dive, now it's much more of a commitment, unless you are being very precise with the ledge cancel, because it's super easy to hit a ledge cancel as it used to be, and now it's probably going to be a lot smaller in the window there. So I think that's a great change as well, just making him be more precise if he is going to do some of the higher maintenance tech. And the final kind of recovery change that they made to him, I guess that's these two changes, is up special no longer puts opponents into flinch, which is not that big of a deal. They're talking about the A part of up special, by the way, where he goes up initially and then starts throwing out the darts all around. Those darts are no longer going to send people into flinch, which is really good, because that move is just like annoying, and you should definitely be able to punish Ranno in that situation. And prior, it was pretty difficult to do so. And then finally, exiting the bubble will now put a minimum of 10 frames of hit stun, and I think this is actually a pretty big change. Presumably, this is going to make it really easy for Ranno to confirm out of the bubble, so it's kind of a buff for Ranno if you really think about it, just because a lot of the time when Ranno is getting sent into the bubble versus the opponent is getting sent into the bubble, the opponent is just not going to be able to capitalize on that. So this is kind of a pseudo buff for Ranno, but also when he himself does get hit into the bubble, you are still going to be able to get an easier punish afterward. They made it so his hit stun is a little bit different, just making it easier to combo, which is just a good quality of life change, I guess, for everyone else in the cast. For down tilt, they added a little bit of recovery time on it, but the main changes are going to be to the sour spot, and basically the sour spot no longer acts as just like a second sweet spot hitbox. You aren't going to be able to confirm this thing into like a forward air or an up air like you used to be able to before. Now you're actually just going to have a move with both a sour spot and a sweet spot on it, which is good, because down tilt was broken before and it's still probably broken. They nerfed all of Ranno's strang attacks, and thank God, because these moves were all way too strong for forward strong. They're going to make the sour spot for it bigger, making it harder to hit the sweet spot, which is a really good change. And by 0.5, they made it kill later, both at high and low percents. Just really strong move. I'm a big fan of that change. For up strong, the main change is going to be coming to this sweet spot with a pretty significant reduce of 0.8. But it's not really going to be affected at all with the Sour Spot, but to be fair, the Sour Spot wasn't that strong anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And for down strong, you're going to make it so the Sour Spot is once again a lot bigger for this, so it's just harder to hit the sweet spot. You actually have to space it, and I just think that was a good change, because before with Ranno, you could literally just throw out that smash attack, and you almost always hit the sweet spot. I'm sure Ranno players didn't even know that move had a Sour Spot, especially for down smash. It was a little bit more evident with F smash, but I feel like every single time you threw it down smash, it was sweet, and it shouldn't be like that anymore. They made a small change to forwarder, adding a new Sour Spot at the top of the hitbox with the highest priority. So this is like when you're above Ranno, you get hit by forwarder, because you can get hit by forwarder above Ranno. Now that's no longer going to be the sweet spot, which I guess is like not a bad change, but I'm really surprised they didn't move or nerf this move more. I thought of all the moves in this game, this was one of the ones that was like certainly going to get nerfed, because this is an amazing combo tool. It is an amazing kill tool. It is an amazing neutral tool. It is an amazing edge guard tool. This thing literally does it all. But a move that I'm not surprised that got nerfed is backer. Of the aerials, you had to nerf either forward or backer, and they ended up going with backer, which I think is fine. So first things first, back air Sour Spots moved upward and strong slightly. This reduces the disjoint of this attack from below, giving opponents a chance to beat this move from some angles while recovering. So I think that's a good change, because just falling with a back air was honestly like a really oppressive edge guarding tool, and they just reduced the damage on this move by a flat amount, pretty much 2% everywhere. So not only does it just do less damage, which is like, you know, awesome, but also there is less damage on shield stun just because it does less damage. That's how shield stun works. So that is going to be something that's really strong, because that was another tool for Ranno that was just really, really good. Just throwing out a back air really quickly, just pressuring someone's shield. And if it hit the shield, it wasn't that big of a deal. You would almost immediately be able to continue up that pressure. They're very rarely able to capitalize on it. So I think this is a very good change for back air. They also added a little bit more landing leg. So just once again, you can't throw it out as willy-nilly in the neutral. And finally, they are going to make some changes to down throw, just so it is a little bit easier to DI with this move. So it's not as easy to confirm into a down throw into forward strong or a down throw into up strong. And these are all really, really good changes for Ranno. Super happy with them. Again, I'm surprised they didn't nerf forward air, but everything else they nerfed, I think, are all like amazing changes, really beneficial. Next up are the changes to Wrastor, and I'm a really big fan of these Wrastor changes. First things first, Forward Special no longer spawns the Slipstream when hitting a shield. I think that's a great change. You should actually have to hit someone with that projectile if you want your neutral just to become significantly better. And I think this is like maybe honestly just the best change in the entire patch. So they made it so this move is significant. This is up B, by the way, significantly weaker at lower percent. So you're not going to be robbing people super early, but they did make it stronger at higher percent. So it still stays a really potent kill tool. And I think that's perfect. Just so that now up B acts as a tool that is almost always going to be stealing stocks at like 80, 90, 100%, but never earlier than that. And I think that's the rule that up B, or the niche that up B should be filling, because as it stood right now, it was definitely potential where you can just get like forward aired off stage combo into up B if you DI that incorrectly, and you just actually explode at 30%. Hopefully that shouldn't be happening anymore. Up B should be like a really consistent killing move, but it shouldn't be a really consistent killing move that kills at like 40. So yeah, I think that up B change is really good for Wrastor, and they also just made it so it's easier to edge guard against Wrastor up B as well. So those are solid changes. Jab 1 and 2, again, just a damage change there. They removed the back hitbox on dash attack, and I don't think that should matter a ton for Wrastor. I feel like the only time you really ever saw that hitbox get value is if someone was like already above Wrastor and then they landed on him while he was like doing a dash attack underneath them, and they just happened to get clipped by that back hitbox. Maybe that happened like a lot for Wrastor players, and is going to be a big deal, but I don't think you'll really notice this one a ton. And for downer hit stun, I also don't know if you'll notice this one a ton, because downer is a very important move in Wrastor's kit. I'd say it's probably his best combo tool. I don't know if it's going to be his best combo tool anymore. You're still almost guaranteed going to be getting a ton of value out of this move. It's still going to be strong, but just not as strong. And I agree with that. It was like clearly the best choice of when you want to start a combo with Wrastor. Maybe there's going to be a little bit more ambiguity with that now. And then finally, they made it just so there is a little bit more startup to back up, just so you have more time to react to it. But Wrastor changes, I think they're really solid. Next character we got to talk about is Kragg, and unfortunately for my Kragg fans, he did receive a nerf, but it wasn't unjustified by any means. This character was definitely a little bit too strong, and I like the changes that they gave to him. They just made it so it's easier to kill Kragg instead of making it so it's harder for Kragg to kill, and I think that's a great approach to take, especially with a character like this. And the first change that they made is to the rock throw. The rock throw startup is now from 6 frames to 8, so it's just going to be slower when he actually throws the initial rock, which I think is a good change. Makes it easier to react to, as well as making the window for comboing into itself smaller. And they made neutral special rock grab recovery from 5 frames to 8. Now, I'm pretty sure this is just applying when Kragg is re-grabbing the rock. I don't know if this is neutral special itself. Please, 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 if anyone in the comments knows, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure this is just when Kragg is re-grabbing the rock. If this is an actual change to neutral special, though, still a fine nerf just because neutral special as it stands right now is a really, really overwhelming tool. You get so much value from it. But I'm pretty sure this is just talking about when Kragg is grabbing the rock after he has already thrown it, because it says rock grab recovery. So I assume that's what it's talking about. Other changes to the rock are going to be holding shield during the rock will allow you to actually just ignore picking up the rock. You'll just go for the normal command grab there. So now if someone stands to the rock, they are still susceptible to the command grab. That's a great change. They made the hurt box of the rock just a little bit bigger. It's just easier to hit, I guess. I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. And the final change is the hurt box is now horizontal instead of vertical, just so break canceling is more consistent. Really does not matter for most people. So these are going to be the big changes to rock. It's just going to be less strong as a tool in neutral. You have more time to react to it, and it's going to be a lot harder for Kragg to just pick up that rock and just throw it into you over and over and over and over again. You're going to have a bigger window to escape in that situation. Moving on from the rock changes to the recovery changes, and I think this is where Kragg got nerfed the hardest in my opinion. You're going to have a quality of life change right here, but up special and forward special cancel landing lag from 22 to 28 frames is a very big increase. So now when Kragg players just go for that Hail Mary to try to make it back to center stage, it's going to be a lot easier to punish them. You still do have the option of ledge canceling as a Kragg player, of course, but if you don't do that, then you're almost certainly going to take a punish. They made it so it takes a little bit more time to summon the pillar as Kragg, so it just makes him easier to contest when he is off stage, or even when he is on stage, it's easier to react to. They made some changes to the pillar as well, and basically all of these changes just made it so that the player is no longer popped up onto the pillar, and they're instead popped up into the air, but Kragg still has the exact same amount of frame advantage that he had as before, and that's why they made just these minute changes here. And then the final changes with Pillar definitely aren't as significant. I honestly don't even know what this second change is here, except that it's both good and bad for Kragg, so I guess I'll take it. Should be noted that you also do get your wall jump back after you hit the Pillar now, which I think is a good change. That should have been in the game when it originally came out. But moving on to some changes to the down B, I think these are really good changes. So they made it a little bit better, the aerial drift for down B, allowing you to space the move better, which is, you know, fine. It wasn't that hard to space already, but whatever. But the really good change to down B is going to be the 13 to 22 frames of special recovery, and I think this is a amazing change just because this move was really, really strong off stage just as a call tool. Every single time you hit a down B, it was almost a free confirm into a downer. Now that window is either going to be non-existent or a lot smaller, which I think is a really, really good change. They made his weight a little bit lighter, which is, I guess, fine. He's just going to be easier to kill. They also made his max fall speed a little bit, I guess, not as fast, so he's going to be easier to kill in that aspect in vertical KOs as well. And that one, I think, is a change that you will feel as a Kragg player, just not being able to fall as fast, but you are still the fastest faller in the game, so it's not like a super significant change, though it definitely sucks. Kragg got pretty much the exact same jab change that everyone else did, though they did make his jab block a little bit easier, so I guess that's nice. They made it so up tilt does less damage overall, and the second hit of up tilt is also going to be hitting less harder, and I think this is actually a pretty important change just because there's a lot of times where you hit like 2 or 3 up tilts in a row, and you can be getting like up to like 10% less for that now if you're just hitting that top hit of up tilt. So that is definitely a change that will matter as a Kragg player, but it's not like he's not going to be able to do damage, because if they added a little bit of recovery time after forward strong, which I honestly don't think is going to matter that much because you were almost always going to be able to punish forward strong, but now you're always going to be able to punish forward strong, which I guess is a good thing. That's like the strongest move in the game, or one of the strongest moves in the game. You definitely should be able to punish it. Forward air, they added a couple changes to forward air. So they made the startup of this move a little bit more, and they made the landing leg of this move a little bit more, which I think was good. It was a really strong tool to just throw it already, and it still is going to be a really strong tool to throw it, but not as much so now. But the main change that I was actually calling for with this move is going to be a change to the sour spot and how strong the sour spot is, and they did end up nerfing the sour spot hitbox, which I think is a perfect change just because the sour spot for this thing was basically just a pseudo sweet spot. It was really, really strong, and they also made the sour spot damage a little bit less as well. Again, not going to be as significant as the up tilt damage change, but it is just a nice quality of life change, and now that sour spot actually should feel like a sour spot instead of just like a hit 2 of your sweet spot. And yes, they did nerf Kragg back here, which is a move that absolutely needed to be nerfed. And I like the way that they approached it. Again, they made it so it is a significantly smaller disjoint now. It's going to be a lot more of Kragg himself hitting you with that back air. And I think that's a really good change just because it used to be just like this amazing neutral tool that you could throw out all the time that was not only disjointed but also set up into like everything that you wanted as the Kragg player. So it was just such a good approaching tool. Now it's going to be a little bit less disjointed. It's going to be more risky to throw it, and it's also going to be more punishing to throw it because there's more recovery time and landing leg, which I think was a very necessary change. This move was just so good for not only chaining into itself but every other move in the game, and it's still going to be doing that, but now the windows for it are going to be a little bit smaller. And they also changed the sour spot knockback angle from 55 to 50. I don't really know what this is going to do, but presumably it's going to be harder to combo from the sour spot, or maybe easier actually to combo from the sour spot now, just because the sweet spot is harder to confirm off of. I honestly don't really know what they're doing with this change, but TLDR, back air is not going to be as oppressive as a neutral tool. Now, it's still going to be very strong for comboing, but it's not just going to be something that you could just throw out as like this wall that you literally, quite literally a wall that you couldn't get in against. And we've got just a couple more changes to Kragg, one of them being a change to his downer. They just added an extra frame to landing lag, and this isn't going to be that big of a deal, but downer's a really strong move, so I think making it easier to punish, not a bad choice at all. They made it so the up throw aerial recovery is going to be from 15 to 20, and this just makes it so it's no longer a guarantee forward air against non-floaty characters, which I guess is a fine change. They made it so down throw is a little bit slower, not really going to matter at all though, and they did change the knockback of down throw, and effectively this will keep opponents closer at higher percents, but they will also be in less hit stun, so Kragg won't be able to combo into forward strong until much higher percents, which is a great change just because down throw to forward strong is like, I don't think he should be able to do that at all, in my opinion. You can do down throw into down strong. That's still good. We don't need down throw into forward strong. So I think this is a really solid change here for Kragg, not only making down throw a better combo tool, but just making it so it doesn't combo into forward strong, because there's no reason that it should do that. And then finally, for cargo throw down, they just made this thing stronger, so it's actually going to be something that you should be throwing down off stage, which I love because I think cargo throw down is the funniest one, and there was no reason to use it off stage. Now there actually is. So really, really happy with these Kragg changes. They made his kill power and his combo power a little bit weaker, touched on the rocks just a little bit, and mainly made it so it's easier to actually exploit this character, which I think was one of the main issues that people were having with Kragg, so well done with the changes. Next up is going to be Fleet, and Fleet is definitely the character that got hit the hardest in these patches, almost unarguably. But I do think the Fleet players are still being a little bit dramatic, and I'll talk about that when I've talked about all the changes with her. But first things first, they ended up changing forward special, and thank goodness they changed this move because it was very, very strong. And I still think it is going to be strong, but not as much. So it's going to be a little bit harder to confirm off this move as they added 3 frames of recovery. So you're still going to be able to confirm off it. You just have to be a little bit more precise as the Fleet. And then they basically just nerfed the Tornado. Forward special's Tornado is now vulnerable 5 frames before it becomes active. The hurt box on it is now 40. Instead of 40, it's 55. And forward special Tornado can no longer break projectiles. So this thing is just going to lose to projectiles now, presumably. And these are all really, really important changes. It just controlled so much space forward special on the stage, and now it's just going to be a lot easier to actually swat that Tornado away and actually get back to the task at hand, which is fighting Fleet instead of this side beat. So I think that's an amazing change. It's still going to be an absolutely broken tool when it hits. If you get clipped by that Tornado, you're still going for a ride, but it's not going to be this like over oppressive neutral tool that you can just throw out, and it's really hard to get rid of. They made the hitbox on the final hit up special smaller by a pretty significant margin, but good because that thing was massive, and I feel like a lot of the time you would get reversals off stage without the Fleet player even intending to do so, because that move was also obscenely strong. So now it's just going to be a lot harder to actually get that like unintentional reversal as the Fleet player. It's going to be easier to edge guard the character, so I think that's a pretty solid change. They made it so down special will now send you into a parry window if you parry the move, whatever, not that big of a deal. Stamina Tornado will now transfer onto successful parry. Again, I don't think this is that big of a deal. What is a big deal though is going to be these 2 changes right here. So slow fall joystick threshold is 0.8 to 0.75. Actually, this isn't that big of a change at all. This just makes it easier to do the slow fall. This is a pretty big change though. Slow fall is no longer restored when grabbing the ledge, so you actually have to land on the ground again before you get your float back. And honestly, should have been in the game since it came out. Don't know why it wasn't. Great change. Absolutely needs to happen. Now she actually has to like go back on stage and get all her resources back in order to actually get all her resources back. So should have been in since the game came out. Good thing it is now. They also just changed her general hit stun and fall speed, so now it is a lot easier to combo Fleet. And I personally never noticed that it was hard to combo Fleet, but if that was an issue that you were having against this character, well, it should be a little bit easier. Now they also, and this is probably the biggest nerf that they gave to her, changed her aerial acceleration from 1.2 to 0.78. I want to read this entire blurb here because I think it's important that they did this change. The Fleet has the highest air acceleration by a large margin, which allowed her to safely reposition in both advantage and disadvantage, especially when combined with her flow fall. This significant change is intended to offset her extreme strengths that are amplified by her unmatched aerial mobility. And it's very important to note that this does not affect her max airspeed, only her ability to accelerate and to decelerate. So basically, this is just going to make her a lot less fluid in the air, but also she still has float, so it's not going to be the end of the world. But I think this was definitely a necessary for change. She was just unnecessary change for Fleet. She was just way too mobile. But I will say, in combination with all of these changes, it may have been a little much. So Fleet got the exact same jab change that pretty much everyone else got. Her dash attack was changed from a knockback angle of 30 to 20, just making it easier to combo, which I guess is a good quality of life change. But here's the first change to her knockback. They made it so the sour spot, for the sweet spot I should say, for Upstrong is significantly weaker at only lower percent, so you're just not going to be robbing stocks with this thing as early. And apparently this move was as strong as Zetterburn's Empowered Upstrong, so yeah, I think it's fine that it did receive a little bit of a nerf. They also gave a nerf to neutral air just as a move in general, the same overall duration but with fewer active frames to help reduce the strength of her offstage edge guard. So the move looks like the exact same animation, just the hitbox for it isn't going to be out as long. I know I just regurgitated that, but whatever. And the forward air changes, these are the last changes that I would have made to Fleet. Like, I would have done all of these changes and I would have done a change to forward air, and that is it. And the forward air changes I actually think are really good. Forward air multi-hit hit stun multiplier from 1.0 to 0.5, and this comes into play if the final hit whiffs, so it's just easier to escape if the final hit does whiff, which makes sense. You should be able to get out immediately if the final hit whiffs. Forward air's hitbox shrunk slightly, so it's actually harder to hit and people will fall out of it a lot more, and it just reduces the wall ability of the move, which again was a major issue that I had with it. It just controlled so much space. And forward air multi-hit SSDI multiplier from 1.0 to 0.5, and this makes it harder to SDI an attack to compensate for the smaller hitboxes. So yes, they are aware that they just made this move significantly weaker. They are going to make it connect into itself more. So now when you hit a forward air, it should be fully chaining into itself, but if it doesn't fully chain into itself, the opponent is going to be able to immediately escape, which I like, because before, if forward air didn't chain into itself fully, you just get nared afterwards. They made some slight changes to back air, making it so that this move has a little bit more landing lag, as well as doing less damage, so it also has less hit stun on shield, and this just makes it less safe on shield, which is really important because I think Fleet is a character that shouldn't have any moves that are safe on shield. You're this projectile floaty character. You shouldn't be able to pressure my shield safely as well. You should be playing that whiff punish archetype, and by nerfing back air, hopefully she will fit a little bit more of that role. Now, these are the first changes that we've come across that I just fundamentally do not agree with. I do not think that they should have nerfed Fleet's up air to the extent that they did. Maybe a little bit of a nerf was required, but they nerfed this move by a lot. Not only does it just do less damage, whatever, but mainly what I care about is this knockback reduction, a significant knockback reduction to this move, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I think with these changes, Fleet was already going to struggle to kill more, and now she's absolutely going to be struggling to kill. Plus, back there was also a weaker kill throw, and now I didn't even know that thing was a kill throw before recording this, I'm not going to lie, but now it is a weaker kill throw. Up throw is now going to peep per bill into tumble, whatever. Up throw recovery is also going to have a little bit more time after that, though, so it's also going to be a little bit harder to combo off of. And then finally, for down throw, it just makes it a little bit more reactable. So for Fleet, I do think that they went a little bit crazy with these Fleet changes. They are a little bit overtuned. Again, I would not have touched up air at all personally, and if I were to touch it, I would not have touched it as hard as I did. But I think the rest of the changes for Fleet were good, and I think Fleet players are being very, very dramatic, because Fleet players, you have to remember, the reason your character is good is because you can edge guard with them. You are the edge guarding character, and I know it sucks that you're no longer going to be able to ladder people into the blast zone and they just explode before they're even out of hit stun, but now you actually have to edge guard people, so you go off stage and you can stall with your neutral special and your float or your forward air. I know the hitbox is a little bit smaller, but it still lasts for quite some time. You also have a down air, which is going to be spiking people from really far away, and yes, you have to go on stage now in order to get your float back. Good. You should be going off stage, float, pressuring, whatever, go back air, go in air, and then you can go off stage and then snipe people with a downer. That is how edge guarding should look with Fleet. Edge guarding with Fleet should not just look like, okay, I nared, I float off stage, I nared, I float back to ledge, I float off stage, I nair, I float back to ledge, I float off stage, nair, and you're just controlling space. You should be going off stage, getting them really far away, using your float to push them as far as you can, but then going for a snipe with a downer. Or if you want to go and continue your edge guard by laddering people up, you actually have to get your resources back by going on the stage. I think these are all good changes for Fleet. I think they were maybe a little bit overtuned, but I also think that Fleet players are being very dramatic. This character is still good. Next up is going to be Maypul, and this is a character that was not touched a ton. Even though I think that Maypul is the best character in the game, for what people are actually doing right now with the character, she is not the one that we had to be concerned about. The devs definitely are aware of that, but I do like this change to neutral special. They just make it so instead of 2%, it does 1%, just making it less strong as a projectile. And now the point of neutral special is to apply wrap on people instead of actually doing damage. And then these are mainly just like kind of quality of life changes. They made the Lily detection radius a little bit smaller, and they also made it so that Lily Bite no longer interrupts a grab. So now if you grab Maypul near the Lily, you're actually going to be able to get value out of that grab. And the final thing is going to be that they made the tail hurt box intangible, or instead of intangible, it is now just ungrabbable. So it's going to be a little bit easier easier to actually hit Maypul. But yeah, these are all very, very small changes to Maypul. Nothing really significant. Even though I think she's the best character in the game, people aren't doing best character in the game stuff with her. So I definitely agree that she really didn't need a change. Next up is going to be Clairen. The first change is going to be to neutral special, and they just made the tipper on that slightly smaller, which I think is a good change just because you get so much reward from that tipper, so I think you should have to have a little bit more precision in order to actually get it. These deck changes are just changes to up special, and this just makes it a lot easier to edgeguard Clairen. These ones are basically just messing with the hitbox of up special itself, so it is a lot easier to contest, and this one is specifically talking about that second hitbox of up special. Afterwards, when Clairen is in special fall, she is going to have a lot less aerial drift, so it's going to be easier to actually just like, catch her out of air or catch her where she is landing and get that punish there. So now that is going to be an even bigger issue for Clairen, even though I think her offstage was already a problem that's even more exemplified. But I do think that's a good thing. That's something that we kind of saw throughout this patch, just issues of characters being hammered home. The things that they're bad at, they should be bad at, and the things that they're good at, they should be good at. They also made some changes to Clairen's ledge special, but these honestly really do not matter in my opinion. What does matter though is this change to her run speed. It's not going to be a super significant one, but making Clairen faster at all I think is a really good change, because I would say that was her main issue beforehand, which is being overwhelmed in the neutral. Not only does she have worse frame data than everyone else, but she's just slower. Now she should be able to catch up with everyone else a little bit easier. They also gave a nerf to her jab as well, and as I alluded to with neutral special, really, really high risk or low risk, high reward moves, so you definitely should be nerfing those, and they make it a little bit more risk by just having the recovery on it smaller, but not by a, or larger, but not by a significant margin. And then they made the tipper window also smaller, which I think is a great change. So now it's just going to be harder to confirm off of the jab tipper. Now, is it actually going to be hard to still run up forward smash or just forward smash? No, but it's going to be a little bit harder to do so. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. They ended up changing the hitbox for the tipper of dash attack to better match the animation, and I don't think that's really going to be noticed that much by Clairen players, but maybe it's like a bigger hitbox nerf than I'm actually giving it credit for. You're going to have to go in game to actually figure that one out yourself, but they ended up changing the combo ability of dash attack as well, just making it combo better at low percents and then worse at high percents, which I agree. I would rather dash attack be a good move at low percents than at high percents. For forward tilt, they're going to make this move just a little bit stronger, which I think is great. That should be a tool that was, or it is a tool that is like effectively useless right now. There's really no reason to build a forward tilt, but if forward tilt is actually a kill tool, then it is a pretty solid spacing tool that you can throw out. As Clairen, speaking of kill tools, 4 strong tipper hitbox adjusted to match the animation better, so this is going to be a little bit stronger. And they also made it so it kills, basically it kills better at lower, or it kills worse at lower percents, but kills the same at higher percents, just because they changed the high rate knockback, which is like exactly what I wanted out of this move. It just killed way too early, but it should still be a very strong kill tool, especially if you hit the tipper, and that basically just solved the problem that I had with it. So great nerf. And finally, for forward strong, they added a little bit of recovery time, but similar to Kragg, I don't think this is going to be that significant of a change. If you were going to get punished for a forward strong, you're probably going to be punished regardless of these extra 4 frames. And there's actually a couple back air changes that they ended up implementing. The first one is going to be that they made it so there's more landing leg, so you're just not able to wall with this tool as strong, which I definitely agree is a good change. They actually buffed the sour spot, making it do more damage and have more knockback, which I actually think is an amazing change, because as it stands right now, when you are edgeguarding with Clairen, if you don't hit a tipper, you basically just shouldn't have edgeguarded at all. But now you can actually go off stage, and if you hit someone with a back air, there is still potential that even without a tipper, it does still kill them. And I think that should be an option for Clairen, just being able to go off stage and edgeguard with your massive sword. Even if you don't hit a tipper, people should still be dying at some point, and they just weren't before with back air. They also made the tipper do a little bit more damage, which is like whatever, but they also made the tipper window on it just a little bit smaller. You're still going to be able to get a majority of your confirms, but one of the ones that they were worried about was back air into down strong, and now the window on that is going to be a lot smaller, if possible, at this point. And the final change on back air is going to be the tipper, which is reduced slightly, which I do think is a good change, because I feel like the tipper on back air specifically was like massive. Like I feel like tipper on back air, neutral special, and forward strong were like way bigger than they needed to be, and they changed all of them, so that's great. They ended up changing the up air sour spot just to make that move feel more consistent overall now, which I think is great. They made it so up air tipper now does more damage, which I think is great, just because it's pretty hard to hit that move. You should be rewarded for hitting it. And then the final changes are going to be coming to back throw and down throw. Back throw startup, there's going to be actually 4 extra frames adjusted to it, and there's going to be an extra frame of back throw recovery, which I think is really important, because as it stands right now, getting like a back throw into a F strong is like almost guaranteed as the Clairen player. Now you're going to be able to react a lot more as the person getting thrown, and Clairen's going to have a little bit less time to actually follow up on that throw, so hopefully you are actually going to be able to escape that window. And then also they made it so the angle for down throw is just a little bit less different. But I think these changes for Clairen are honestly like really good. Maybe some of them were a little bit unnecessary. Like I don't think she necessarily needed to be nerfed in terms of her edge guarding, like I think, or in terms of her recovery, but I don't think it was a bad change by any means. Next up is going to be Loxodont, and they actually ended up nerfing this character pretty significantly, which I definitely don't agree with, but there is one change that I really like, and I'll bring that up when I see it. But the first change is going to be neutral special air acceleration while charging is 0.53 to now 0.28. I think this change isn't going to be that big of a deal, to be honest, because a lot of the time, if you were going to hit that neutral special, you were going to hit that neutral special, but now it's just not going to be absolutely free to confirm out of like the second or third, or I should say the first and second charge of a down special. You're actually going to have to follow the opponent before you do that neutral special instead of just immediately charging the neutral special and then following them afterwards. So that is definitely a nerf that you will feel as Loxodont, but it's not like the end of the world. You're still going to hit a majority of the neutral specials that you hit, but just those ones specifically after a down special aren't going to be as free to confirm into, and they were very free to confirm into as it standard right now. Forward special will now fall slightly after grabbing an opponent. I honestly don't know how important this change is going to be. I don't think it's going to matter a ton. It feels like more of a quality of life change just to get magma on the ground, so it shouldn't matter a ton, but please correct me, Lockdown players, if that one is like actually significant. And they ended up changing the knockback angle for both the first and second charge of down special just to make it harder to confirm into with downer when the opponent DIs in, which I don't think is like the end of the world, to be honest. I know a lot of people weren't happy about this, but you're still going to be able to confirm it into like a back air. You're still going to be able to confirm it into a neutral special. I think rewarding people for doing good DI and not having them just die is a good thing, because every other character in Rivals has that. You really cannot DI down before Loxodont. You are almost always going to take the best punish from that thing no matter what. Now it feels like DI is going to have more influence on that move, which I think is a good change. Now, was it a necessary change? Probably not, but not a bad one, I suppose. But this is the change that I really like for Loxodont. I actually think this is a huge buff for the character, and that's going to be the fact that the lava pool durations, instead of being 5 seconds, they are now infinite. So Loxodont can put the lava pool on the ground, and whenever he collects lava pool is when he collects it. That is such an important change for Loxodont, because the difference between having magma with this character and not having magma with this character is being like clearly the worst character in the game to in contention for worst character in the game. Magma makes Loxodont so much better. His recovery is better, his neutral is better, his advantage save is better, everything about the character is better, and this is just going to make it so it's a lot easier for him to get magma now, even if he like maybe gets hit in the neutral or gets hit when he was applying magma. That magma will be waiting for him when he does get back to the stage. So really big fan of this change. I honestly think it's a massive buff for the character, but in combination with all of the other nerfs, it doesn't really feel like it. They made it so Loxodont is a little bit less heavy, but again, like Kragg, probably not going to be feeling this one too significantly. They made him a little bit easier to combo, or less floaty while being comboed, I should say. They added a little bit of it. I think this is like end lag 2 jab 1, which is, I guess, fine. You really won't be feeling this at all. It's very rare that jab 1 either just doesn't connect and you get punished for it, or jab 2 does connect and you won't be able to get a follow-up because of these extra 2 frames. So I really don't think you'll be feeling this change at all. And they made jab 2 easier to confirm into, which I guess is a nice change. They made it so down tilt is easier to detect into the wall if you get down tilted at the ledge, which I think is actually a fine change there. You should have the choice of teching into the wall. That's always a really satisfying feeling as someone who got spiked, so whatever. And they also made, I think this is a really good change for Loxodont, down throw startup is from 39 to 21 now. So now this is actually going to be a mix-up, an effective tech chasing mix-up where you can actually catch people off guard instead of Loxodont going and then throwing you to the ground, taking his time with it. It's going to be an actual mix-up tool now. So I think that is a pretty solid change. And then the final ones are going to be coming to neutral, just making this move do less damage, which I think is a really good change, just because neutral was such an important part in Loxodont's kit. They also added a little bit of landing lag, but only 1 frame. But again, I think this is a good change just because neutral was such an important part of Loxodont's kit. It comboed into itself. You're doing Nair 1 all the time, and you're just racking up so much damage. So you will be doing a little bit less. And I think all of these changes with Loxodont are good. I don't have a problem with any of them, but like, did we need to make it so his jab was a little bit slower? No. Like, did we need to make it so that it was a little bit easier or harder to confirm into neutral special? I really don't think so. I think the changes were unnecessary, but I don't think any of these changes are really going to affect Loxodont in any significant ways. And I do think the buffs that he got with down throw, and specifically with the magma being applied to the ground, are actually really good, to the point where I no longer consider him the worst character in the game, potentially. Next up is going to be Orcane, and this is one of the characters that actually ended up getting nerfed the hardest this patch, which was definitely a surprise to me, but Orcane players, you really only have yourself to blame. I mean, look at this description. Orcane is one of the most slippery characters to fight when he is played in a way that minimizes interaction. We're targeting a lot of tools that enable this playstyle, such as forward air and down special, to try to make Orcane interact more with opponents. So, Orcane players, maybe a little bit of reflection needs to be done here. Maybe need to change up our playstyle just a little bit. But let's actually look at these changes. Neutral special recovery from 16 to now 22 frames of end leg. And neutral special and down special droplets have both been changed. So the hit multiplier or the hit pause multiplier on them is just cut in half. And I think this is a great change. I always kind of liked Orcane's neutral special being as a pseudo Pikachu T-Jolt, just in the sense that it's a projectile that allows you to close the space on your opponents. But it was just way too easy for him to close that space, in my opinion, and it was just such an annoying projectile to deal with. He was constantly throwing it out, refreshing the bubbles on the ground, so you're getting bubbles like coming up in the air, and another neutral special was landing before you're even out of those bubbles. So hopefully that should mitigate the pressure that Orcane is able to create with neutral special. And I think out of all of the changes in Orcane's kit, this is the one change that I'm definitely here for, because that move was extremely spammable, just making a million platforms or puddles on the ground with bubbles everywhere. Now you're not going to be able to do that as easily. Good change. And they also ended up messing with Orcane's recovery, which I really don't like. I actually think Orcane's recovery was in a really good spot where you could be super creative as the Orcane player. You had so many options at your disposal. But at the end of the day, if there was no puddle on the ground, all that your opponent had to do was keep you from getting to that ledge, and you were in a really, really bad spot, or predict if you were going to overshoot with a forward air. But now they made it so forward special not only has a large hurt box after teleporting until the active frame ends, or active frames end, but also forward special can no longer grab the ledge for the first 10 frames of the recovery window. So it's going to be way easier to mess with Orcane when he's trying to recover with side B, which isn't like the worst thing in the world. It was pretty hard to contest with that move, but I just don't think it was a change that was needed to be implemented at all. I think Orcane was not easy to edgeguard, not too hard to edgeguard, but just in a good spot with his recovery. And now I think that is skewed a little bit towards the everyone else's favor, while also nerfing every other aspect of this character. So I'm not really a big fan of these forward special changes. Also, this up special change is just making it so the sour spot of up special is shrunken when he actually comes out of the bubble, which is a great change in my opinion. There shouldn't even be a sour spot on the thing. If you get hit by Orcane coming out of the puddle, you should die at 0%. I don't care. You got played. And they ended up adding quite a couple down special changes as well. The first one's going to be that it no longer stalls your momentum in the air. And this isn't really a nerf or a buff. It's literally just a change, because while it's on stage, I'd say it's a buff because it makes it so you're now more fluid in the neutral. You can just drop that thing without actually losing your momentum. But off stage, you do lose that little bit of extra stall. But it really shouldn't matter. Off stage, he was already fine in terms of stall. At least he was fine off stage. Maybe that won't be the case anymore, but that's a conversation for another time. They made it so down special recovery windows can now edge cancel. That's great. I love when they add edge cancels. They made it so down special puddle pop recovery is now 30 frames instead of 22, so 8 frames. That is a pretty significant difference, but I don't think that's a bad change, because down B is like really strong. It just covers a ton of space in front of the opponent, and it was really easy for Orcane to capitalize on. Now, not only is he going to be able to do it less often, but he's also going to be able to capitalize off it, or it's going to be harder for him to capitalize off of it, I should say. They also made it so down special just controls less space. The bubbles don't rise as fast, so they're not going to be rising as high in that situation, and this is just like kind of a quality of life change to down special. The first 2 bubbles spawned by down special will always appear on the outermost edges. The next 2 bubbles will spawn halfway out, and then the rest are random. So this is going to make this move a lot easier to SDI predictably as someone getting hit by it, but presumably it would also make this move a lot easier to combo off as Orcane, because the bubbles are always going to pop up or at least those first 2 bubbles will always pop up as opponents the exact same way. And speaking of bubble ASDI multiplier, you just have more counterplay now when you are able to SDI against bubbles. If you can SDI against bubbles, it's going to be easier to get out of them, and that sucks for Orcane, because they made it already harder to confirm off of all of his bubble stuff. They ended up changing the weight of Orcane, but not by 2 units this time, by a whole 4. You can tell that this was a personal patch against this character. Absolutely. Jab 1 and 2, same changes as everyone else. But Jab 3, it does take a little bit of a nerf, and it doesn't send people into tumble as early, but not that big of a deal, to be honest. Forward tilt is going to have a little bit more startup and a little bit more recovery. Up tilt is going to have a little bit more recovery, and I think you would maybe feel this with up tilt just because it's a move that you spam into itself, so you may actually start to notice that. Forward tilt, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, to be honest. Neutral air can no longer bounce after its parry. Makes sense. Should have been always like that. And then finally, you're going to have forward air changes. They added 6 frames of recovery to forward air and no longer breaks projectiles, which I think is a great change. And the hitbox shrunk and is moved forward to be less of a disjoint. I didn't even know that move had a disjoint, but Orcane is going to be hitting more with his body now. And then the final change that they made is adding a little bit of landing lag, 12 frames to 16. Now, I do not think they should have changed Orcane at all. I think this character was not good enough to justify a nerf. But I understand why they changed Orcane. They changed it because his playstyle was not fun. Not because he was too good. It's because for newer players that he was just overwhelming and difficult to deal with in the neutral. And I think that's fine. But I think if you were going to do these changes, maybe you should have also get a change to like up air to make up air a little bit faster or make back air a little bit stronger. So the good Orcane players are still able to capitalize. And again, I wouldn't have changed Orcane at all. But if I had to have changed Orcane, I would have changed forward air, and I would have changed it so SDI out of bubbles is way, way easier. I think those would have been the best changes to make for the top level, but I don't think that these changes were made for the top level. And I think it's really important for people that are watching this video, just for anyone, especially people in the competitive scene, though, to understand that these changes were made so this character is easier to fight for lower level and mid-level players, even high-level players. And yeah, it definitely sucks. These changes are really bad for Orcane, and I think he's the worst character in the game at this point. But you got to remember that this isn't only a top tier game. There is other elements that they do have to worry about when designing stuff. And I do agree that Orcane at a low level was extremely toxic to fight against. Hopefully he's not going to be like that. And hopefully, especially hopefully in the next patch, Orcane will get a couple kill power buffs and maybe even some movement buffs. But the bubble stuff, I think, is okay to be nerfed. It was a little overwhelming for new people. And the final character we got to talk about is Forsburn, and he really wasn't changed that much, just some quality of life changes, if I'm being honest. And they also mess with his recovery just to make it a little bit more easy to contest. But Neutral Special now has diminishing returns on the strength of the air stall, so using Neutral Special off stage isn't going to give you as good air stall if you get hit back off stage. Forward Special Clone Toss Recovery window air acceleration from 0.72 to 0.4, so this just reduces his aerial drift after using the move while recovering. He just have a burst of aerial drift. Now he's not going to have that. Clone can now be detonated during the special fall window of up special, just a quality of life change. And honestly, this is potentially the biggest buff that they gave to Forsburn. Adjusted Super Clone attack choice to be consistent based on the target's relevant relative location, similar to how it worked in Rivals of Aether. So I don't know how the clone worked in Rivals of Aether. If the clone is good in this game, though, it just operates as like a level 4 or level 5 CPU, even a level 3 CPU. That could be amazing for Forsburn, even if it is just the super clone, just the pressure that he would be able to get out of that, and some of the combo routes that he would be able to take, as well as the kill confirms. I think it'd be super, super potent. So that could be like a really important change, or it could matter like not at all. They ended up adding a little bit of lag to Forsburn's upbeat recovery. So now if you want the optimal recovery, you should go into special fall, just barely above the stage, instead of actually landing on the stage and getting that extra landing lag. So that's pretty interesting. These are all just quality of life changes, except hitting an opponent will reset his up special smoke cancel count. That should have been in the game since the start. Jab changes, same as everyone, except jab 3 knockback has been changed just a little bit. So I think this makes it weaker at lower percents and then stronger at higher percents. Well, I have actually no idea. Please correct me on how that exactly has been changed, but they do have a lot more recovery at the end of this move, so it's just a lot more committal to throw out jab 3, which I think is a fine change. It's not really going to matter that much. I feel like it wasn't often that you're whiffing jab 3 on someone's shield, but I mean, if you were doing that as a Forsburn player, I mean, you're going to have to do it less. Now, up tilt, they just make it so up tilt connects into itself more, which is good. It was falling out, and it should never fall up tilt, always fully connecting itself. Absolutely agree with that. I don't think that's a move that you should be able to SDI out of, in my opinion. And then finally, they just made some changes to Forward Strong. We're making it slightly more punishable since it has such a long range, so they're going to have a little bit more recovery time on it, but they're also going to make the dagger hitbox a little bit stronger, and I think that's actually the correct way to change Forward Smash. Nerf the cape, buff the dagger, because the dagger was weak, but the cape was just like a combo tool. You use Forward Strong more as a combo tool than you did as a kill tool, if I'm being completely honest, and with these changes, it should be a little bit more on the other side of that. And I promised y'all a tier list at the start of this video, ranking how good I thought these changes are. Well, here that tier list is, starting off with Orcane. And as I've already established, I think these Orcane changes are really, really bad, and honestly just really unnecessary for the most part. And again, I'm pretty sure these changes were done through the perspective of like high level to low level play. You want to make this character a lot easier to interact with neutral, and I think that is a good mindset for changing a video game. But we only care about the competitive scene because that's all we care about. We're obsessed, what can I say? And this hurts Orcane really, really bad at the competitive level. He was already a weak character, but this makes him like probably the weakest character in the entire game. And I do think that they will correct this at some point. Orcane buffs will be coming, but as it stands right now, this character is like garbage, maybe unviable. That could be stretching it. I haven't actually seen too many Orcanes in practice yet, but this is the closest thing we've had to an unviable character since Loxodont came out. So obviously that's not super great. I think they went a little bit too hard with the changes there, and it's the exact same thing for Fleet, except Fleet actually like absolutely should have been nerfed. Maybe not at every level of play. This was kind of like an opposite Orcane situation, where at most levels of play Orcane's been really good, but at the top level he's not good. Where Fleet, at most levels of play, she's not really good, but at the super top level she's like unbelievable. Absolutely needed to be nerfed, and I like a lot of the nerfs that they gave to Fleet. But I think they did go a little bit overboard with some of her kill power nerfs. I don't think that she necessarily needed that. Again, I think the fleet players are definitely overreacting, but it was a little bit of an overcorrection. Also, I just want to make it clear, when I said that we haven't had an unviable character since Loxodont, I wasn't implying that Loxodont was unviable. He's just the worst character in the game. He's our frame of reference. And he may have potentially gotten worse in this patch because he did receive a couple nerfs. And that's the reason why he's in this meta or unchanged tier, because if he wasn't to receive any nerfs and he just got the magma change, would have been a great change. Would have been the best change, actually. I am such a fan of that magma change. I think the big problem for Loxodont as a character is not being able to get magma, because when he has magma online, he's like actually a very decent character, mobility-wise, recovery-wise, combo-wise, everything just gets significantly better. But when he doesn't have magma, he is just so much worse, and that's a big struggle for him to get that online. With this change, it should be a lot easier, but with the other nerfs, he may still feel like the worst character in the game. So I just feel like those nerfs really were unnecessary, but huge fan of that magma change. Maypul really didn't change her at all. Clairen, I think the changes were unnecessary, all of them, but I also think all of them were, like, good. So she's just in the meh tier. Like, yeah, whatever. You didn't really need to do any of those, but I'm okay with all of them. And then finally for Forsburn, they didn't really make any significant changes to Forsburn, and that's the only reason that he's in this unchanged tier. But I like the changes that they made to Forsburn. Actually, I'll move him up to the good change tier. I like that backyard change specifically. I think that's a really good one. Next up in the good tier is Kragg and Ranno, and these characters were probably the two best characters in the game in terms of results. They absolutely needed to be nerfed, and I'm really happy with all of the nerfs that they were given. I think they took a super good approach to it. Nothing overtuned where they're not strong anymore. There's still going to be some of these stronger characters in this game, but some of their bigger BS is now taken away, and they are easier to exploit. But I'm a Kragg main and a Ranno secondary, so I don't want them to be nerfed at all. My brain, great choice. My mind, or my heart rather, real bad, so they're just going to average out to a good choice. Good job on that one, Dan, I guess. And then you're going to have Forsburn here. I just really like the AI change. I think that's exactly what he needed, as well as the change to Forward Smash, which I didn't even notice when I was initially reading the patches. But just making Forward Smash less of a combo tool and more of a kill tool, I also think is a great change, because, as I said earlier, you pretty much never use Forward Smash for a kill tool. It was only a combo tool. And then finally, you're going to have the changes to Wrastor. The slipstream change is great, as well as mainly that change to Uppy. I'm such a big fan of that Uppy change. I just don't like moves that steal and actually steal stocks at like 30-40%, but now Wrastor, once you get past 90%, you're just in the kill zone for Uppy at all times, and I think that's honestly a great change. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the sport. It's been absolutely unreal as of late. Let me know what y'all think about this patch. I think a lot of people are unhappy with it, but also every character in the game basically got nerfed, so everyone's mains got nerfed. Of course, they are not going to be super happy, but I also think players are being dramatic. Aside from Orcane and Fleet, which definitely took some super heavy hits, everyone is still going to be very good, and I do think the Fleet players are being very dramatic. I still think that character is absolutely going to be viable. She's definitely going to drop a couple spots on the tier list because you can no longer ladder people into the blast zone, but you're still the best edge guarder in the game. You still have float as a mechanic, which is absolutely broken. Fleet players, you're going to be fine. Orcane players, you might actually have to wait for that next buff. You guys got hit pretty hard here, but we can't all be winners here. And yeah, that's all I gotta say. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.